Hey everyone, what's going on? I'm the Justice League Junkie, and today I'm going to be reviewing Batman Year One. This is a great introduction into the character of Batman. It collects Batman 404 to 407. It's written by Frank Miller and illustrated by David Mazzucchelli. If you're wondering where this book goes in the whole DC chronology timeline nonsense, because trust me, it is nonsense. This is the post-crisis origin of Batman. And if you don't know what I mean by post-crisis, DC has this epic story called The Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it basically resets all of DC from being a multiverse into one timeline. And Batman Year One is what kicks us off into Batman in this new post-crisis world. So what's the basic premise of this story? So Batman Year One is really a tandem story. One half of the story deals with how Bruce Wayne becomes Batman and refines his skills. Really, that story takes a backseat, in my opinion, to the main character, who is Jim Gordon. Jim Gordon is a brand new police officer in Gotham City. He's moved from Chicago, and he and this new vigilante, Batman, take down the corruption within Gotham's police department. There's no big bad, there's no Scarecrow, no Joker, no recognizable villain. It's just Batman and Commissioner Gordon taking down corruption within Gotham City's police department. So now I'm going to kind of take you issue by issue and hash over some of the key plot points. So we're going to start with issue 404, the first chapter of Batman Year One, and it starts with Jim Gordon arriving in Gotham City with his pregnant wife, Barbara Gordon. No, not Batgirl, that's his wife, Barbara. It took me a while, I was confused about that too, but that is his wife, and Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, comes into the story much later, not even in this book. But anyway, when he arrives in Gotham, he's greeted by his new partner, Detective Flass, and they go and they meet Commissioner Loeb. Flass and Loeb end up being some of the big villains of this story, but I wouldn't call them villains, just, bad people. So early on in their interactions, Flass demonstrates his unethicalness while he's dealing with some street-level thugs. Instead of just arresting them with minimal force, he pounds them into the ground and shows them, who's boss and why they shouldn't be messing with him. So then we flash over to Bruce's training. He's out in the cold forest and he's punching trees and he's building muscle, getting ready to fight villain and, crime. So then we go back to Detective Gordon, and it shows us him doing all of his detective work very ethically, like a good cop would, unlike the corrupt cops of Gotham City. And so this angers Flass and Commissioner Loeb, who, very used to taking bribes and whatnot. And it even shows in Loeb's office, Loeb talks to Flass about how Gordon refused to take a bribe. And so they both agree that Gordon needs to be softened up. So then we flash back to Bruce Wayne, and he's preparing for his first test of being a vigilante. And while this is happening, Gordon basically jumped by a bunch of off-duty cops. Now, at first he thinks it's just, he got jumped by some thugs, whatever, and then he hears a laugh, and he recognizes the voice, and he recognizes the laugh, and it's Detective Flass, so he knows that he's been set up. So anyway, we go back to Bruce. He has kind of masked his identity. He doesn't have a mask, but he alters his face. He gives himself some scar and whatnot so that, if somebody tried to identify him, they wouldn't think that it was Bruce Wayne. They would think it's somebody else because, Bruce Wayne doesn't have a giant cut on his face. So anyway, he's patrolling the streets in one of Gotham's dirty districts, and he finds a pimp harassing the worker. The worker tries to, entice Bruce, and the pimp doesn't like how she goes about it and starts harassing her, and so Bruce intervenes. This is also where we get our first introduction to Selina Kyle, who's upstairs watching, and she's very protective of this worker. And so anyway, Bruce gets stabbed and he is defeated, and cops show up and they arrest him as he's blacking out. And we hear the cops say that he has no identification on him, just a little bit of cash, so they can't ID him. They put him in the back seat and they take him to the hospital, or they try to. And then Bruce comes to, and he warns them He warns the cops to get out, and they're like, what the heck is this guy talking about? And then he breaks his handcuffs off and forces the car to crash. And so after the car crashes, he's like thinking, oh my God, what have I done? Like, these people have families. If I'm going to be doing this, I got to be thinking more ethically. I got to be thinking more about, who I'm dealing with, and the fact that these aren't just criminals and corrupt cops that I'm dealing with. These are people who have families. So he's starting to go through that process and become the Batman that we know, with his, sense of ethicality. So anyway, after he escapes the cop car, it's gone up in flames. He makes his way back to his Porsche, and he drives recklessly through Gotham on his way back to Wayne Manor. And then we flash back to Detective Gordon, and he is on a phone call asking where Flass is, and they say, oh, Flass is, he's with the guys and they're playing poker. So Gordon goes, I see. He knows that when they get together and play poker, they, smoke some cigars, they get drunk. And so Gordon goes to the house where they're playing poker, and he parks his car and he waits. And he sees some of the other detectives or cops, whatever, come out of the house, and he's like, well, there's so-and-so. He's always the first one out. He's got to go to his wife and kids. And then there's so-and-so. He's drunk. And then finally, Flass is the last one to leave. So Flass gets in his car and he starts driving, and Gordon tails him. And then when they're semi in the middle of nowhere, he rams his car and drives him off-road. And Gordon gets out of the car and beats Flass senseless. I mean, knocks the crap out of him, strips him naked, and handcuffs him so that he can't move, and he's stuck bare naked in the snow in the dead of night. And Gordon knows that, this isn't going to come back to him, because he knows that Flass wouldn't dare report this, because Flass is this, very masculine guy. And he knows that if he comes to the commissioner, he's just going to get laughed at. So he wouldn't stake his reputation on that. So Gordon knows that he can get away with this. So anyway, we flash back to Bruce, and he's now sitting in a chair in Wayne Manor, and he's slowly bleeding out from his injuries, and he's having a conversation with his deceased father. And he's not really talking to his father, but he's having this conversation in his head. He's thinking, what can I do differently? What I need a purpose. I need something to drive me. Dad, I need to avenge you. How can I do that? And as if answering Bruce, a bat flies through the window and perches itself and stares Bruce down. And then Bruce knows then that is what he must become. He must become the Batman. And that's the end of issue 404. So now we go into issue 405, chapter 2 of Batman Year 1. This is much less dense than the first, but I'll still go through it anyway. So it starts off with Gordon disarming a hostage situation. There's a woman with a child at gunpoint, and all the cops are like, oh, shoot her, shoot her, shoot her. And Gordon realizes that this is a more delicate situation. So what he does is he shows that he is dropping his gun, and he's entering the building where the hostage is being held. And he tries to reason with the criminal, and, they're very delusional. So, Gordon just does his best. And then he eventually disarms the criminal and, saves the day. And so what this shows is that, Gordon, he's an ethical cop. He does things by the book, and he has compassion. And this earns him the public's trust. So now the public trusts him. They respect him. And it's this very diverse dichotomy between Gordon being the ethical cop and the rest of the police force being, super corrupt. So anyway, we flash to Batman, and this is where Bruce Wayne makes his first appearance as Batman. He has the costume, and, he has every intention of becoming the Batman that we know and love. So first thing he does is he stops some thieves from robbing an apartment. They've stolen this television. They're on the little catwalk, whatever. And Bruce surprises them and tries to beat them up, and he struggles quite a bit, and he's realizing that he's got a lot of work to be done before he can do what he needs to do, but he does get the job done, and he stops these 3 amateurs. So then after that scene, we go to Gordon in the police headquarters, and he's briefing all of his fellow cops on this new vigilante, the Batman. And they've got these cool pictures in the back of what they think he looks like, because all they have are witness testimonials. And since it all occurs at night, they're not really sure what this Batman is. So that's pretty cool. And then we go to Batman as he is setting up camp outside the mayor's mansion. He dispatches the guard and he's setting up for this really elaborate staged intervention into what the mayor's doing. And we go inside and we see that the mayor's talking to Commissioner Loeb, and Loeb receives a phone call from Gordon, and they're arguing about the Batman. And then when they hang up, the mayor and Loeb and the party that's there, they're talking about, oh, maybe this Batman's not so bad because, this Batman, he's cleaning up criminals, and, he's cleaning up the city. Gotham has a hero, and it's not so bad. And then Batman throws a smoke grenade into the window, busts through, turns on a floodlight, and makes this really scary, imposing image of himself. And he basically just gives them a stern warning, and he says, you're not safe anymore. I know what you've been doing. And then the scene ends. So then we go to Gordon walking into Harvey Dent's office. Harvey Dent was mentioned in that scene with the mayor and Commissioner Loeb. And Dent is trying to take down Detective Flass because Dent knows about the corruption and whatnot. So Gordon comes in to talk to Harvey Dent about, what have you heard, yada, yada, yada. And then he gets to, I need to ask where you were on these dates, because he thinks that, Harvey Dent might be the Batman. But Gordon leaves, and then we see that Batman is hiding under the desk. And Dent says, you can come out now. I thought he'd never leave. So we know that Harvey Dent and Batman are working together now. So that's pretty cool. And then we come into this little final scene of this issue. Gordon has a female partner, Essen. They're driving around and they're flirting. She lights a cigarette and she gives it to him, and he's like, I can taste the lipstick. Ooh. So anyway, there's this truck that comes out of nowhere, and it's just zoom. So they cause this kind of a wreck, and there's an old lady in the road, and Batman and Commissioner Gordon are there, and they're thinking, I got to save this lady. And Gordon he tries to get into the truck and stop it, and it's not working. He's thinking, it's too late. It's too late. This woman's dead. And Batman comes out of nowhere and saves this innocent woman. And then since Batman's there, Essen pulls a gun on him and is like, freeze. And then these other cops come in, and Batman runs off into an alley. And then Gordon has this realization of he's trying to save people. He's not this, villain. He just saved this innocent woman for no reason. He must have a good heart. And so Batman runs into this kind of like old and abandoned house or whatever. And there's some homeless people in there, maybe some drug addicts. And he's trying to hide out from the cops. And Detective Gordon realizes that there's another corrupt officer, Brandon, who's on the case. And he's there. And he knows how violent Brandon can be. This was shown earlier in the book. And Gordon tries to send out a message, don't fire. Please tell Brandon not to. And then it cuts, and there's this big explosion, and it's inferred that Brandon ordered a bomb or just for the house to be blown up with Batman inside and all these other innocent civilians. And we end the issue in a blaze of fire. And we don't know what's happened to Batman. All right. So now we're in issue 406. We open up with Batman inside the exploding building, the burning building. We see that he's survived and he's lost his tool belt, and he finds a metal trap door and he unlocks the lock on it, and he thinks to himself that, that metal barrier is a great place to hide under to survive the explosion. So then we cut to Selina. She's in her apartment, and she's woken up by a bunch of cats because, she's Catwoman, just not yet. And she's told by her associate that, there's a big explosion. And so we're seeing, a different perspective of what's going on. And Selina just goes, it was probably just Brandon who found a jaywalker, because he's just known to be very violent. And then we cut back to the scene of the crime, the explosion. We see a SWAT team entering the house looking for Batman, and they're, shoot to kill. We're looking for a corpse. Whatever, we're bringing this guy down. So they find the trap door and see that it's unlocked, so they go into it, and they hope that they can find Batman, and it's empty, and Batman's actually hiding in the rafters, and he kind of takes out this entire unit. So then another unit comes in looking for Batman, and now he's run out of tools. He lost his tool belt. All he has on him is a tranquilizer and a little sonic device, which we'll get to later. So he's hiding out, he's stitching up his bandage, or, he's wrapping up his leg for all the bleeding, and he comes across this cat that survived the blast, and more on that cat later, it's important. So anyway, some cops come down the stairs and Batman uses a tranquilizer and knocks out one of the cops, and then he makes a run for it. And as he's running, all these cops are shooting wildly. They're shooting out the window. One of them pegs one of the officers outside, and Gordon's all pissed off because they're being reckless. And another officer tries to kill the cat. And so as Batman's on his way out, he makes sure to personally take down the officer that tried to kill the cat. So I think that was a cute little touch. So then Batman uses his sonar device, and it calls a bunch of bats from a nearby cave. It might be the Bat Cave, I'm not sure. But it causes this huge commotion and helps Batman to, escape. He's out of the building, he's on the street, and all these bats are everywhere, so everybody's freaking out. So Batman hops on a motorcycle and he guns it. Meanwhile, Commissioner Loeb and somebody else are in a helicopter observing all this happening from above the building, and they see Batman get onto this motorcycle. So they go to chase him, and so they're chasing this giant cloud of bats that's following Batman. And then Batman escapes, and then through Gordon's monologue, we find out that they had chased Batman through 12 blocks, only to find out that they were just chasing a bunch of bats. Batman was gone. And another cop who was chasing the bats managed to drive himself off a pier and dies. So, wow, he was committed. So then we cut to Gordon's office, and he's with his partner Essen. They're trying to deduce Batman's identity. He's thinking, it's got to be Bruce Wayne from what Essen's told me about him. So he calls Bruce Wayne, and, he doesn't answer. Oh, Master Bruce is in Switzerland. He's skiing, and he had an accident. So they postulate on whether or not it could be Bruce Wayne, and then we cut to Gordon and Essen meeting at a diner after shift. And it's revealed that, this has become a regular occurrence. Their shift ends, they'll go to a diner and have coffee and then go home. And tonight, they're talking about some stuff. It starts raining. Gordon walks her out to a cab, and they share a nice romantic kiss. And, there's some implications behind that. Cheating's not okay, by the way. So anyway, we cut to Catwoman just for a few panels, and we see that, Selina Kyle has a Catwoman suit now. She has dressed up as Catwoman, and she jumps off her building, and then we cut away from her. And then we go back to Gordon, and he's wrestling with himself over, what he's done. He cheated on his wife, who's pregnant, by the way, and he keeps going over, how awful it is, and, how tangled up he's getting with Essen, and how, that's just not cool. And then he also gets on this little tangent about, what do I do about the Batman? The cops are having me chase after him like he's some criminal, but, he saved a cat. He saved that old woman. Maybe he's not such a bad guy. What do I do? And so then that's how we end issue 406. So now we move to the final issue of Batman Year 1, issue 407, chapter 4. And it opens with Gordon and Essen having a moment in, the diner they always go to after their shifts. And they're talking about, where this is going. And she brings up, if your wife wasn't pregnant, would we... No, I'm sorry. It's not fair to you. And then we cut to Gordon and Essen sharing a lovely goodbye kiss in his office. And he tells us that she has been transferred and she's moving to New York. And then we cut again to Gordon, who busts a dealer named Skeevers, but Skeevers then gets to walk, and Gordon goes to Harvey Dent's office and yells at him about it. Why'd you let him walk? And he's very upset about it. So then Batman makes his way to Skeevers' apartment, and he basically takes him down and convinces him to strike a plea deal with Gordon so that, they'll get a testimony about Flass, and they're going to take him down. And then Commissioner Loeb calls Gordon into his office and says, basically, you're going to drop this case on Flass unless you want everybody to know about the little affair you've been having with Essen. And this terrifies Gordon. So anyway, Gordon and his wife go to Wayne Manor, and they go to interrogate Bruce about, whether or not he's Batman. And Bruce is sitting there on the couch, lounging in his bathrobe, drinking some champagne with a girl on his arm. And he's like... What are you talking about? Batman? Really? Look at me. I'm sitting here getting drunk. So Gordon and his wife leave, and Gordon stops the car, and he decides to tell his wife everything that happened with Essen, so that way he doesn't have to fear about blackmail. He told her himself, and so it doesn't matter if the commissioner tells her, whatever. So he goes on pursuing this case on Flass. And then Gordon interrogates Flass, And then Skeevers gets poisoned before he goes to testify in the trial. And this is a lot of rapid cuts. And then Gordon's wife gives birth, and they have a baby boy. And then we cut to Selena in her apartment with her associate, and she's talking about how much money she's stolen, but she doesn't know what to do with all these jewels and watches and jewelry, whatever. But she gets upset when the news credits Batman with all these robberies. She's pretty upset about it because she wants to be the one who's known as the cat burglar. So anyway, we cut to Batman on a new bat glider, and he's doing some surveillance on the Roman, who's going to tell his nephew some indicting evidence about all the partnerships with the cops and whatnot. And then Catwoman shows up trying to rob the place, and she gets into this whole kerfuffle with the Roman and his gang, and so she ruins Bruce's reconnaissance mission. And then we cut to Gordon getting woken up to feed the baby, and then he gets a call from the commissioner. You have to go do this. And so he leaves his apartment, and then he has this aha moment of, wait, the thing he called me to do isn't necessary, or like it's already happened or whatever. And then he realizes something's up. So he turns around and goes back home just in time to see that his wife and son have been kidnapped. And he catches the assailant while they're outside his house going into the car. So then he shoots the goons, and they take off with his son, and here's a motorcycle rev up behind him, shoots the man on the motorcycle, steals the motorcycle, and then chases after the car with his son in. And then we find out that it's Bruce who is on the back of the motorcycle, and Gordon's wife has a gun to his head and says, I'll kill you, don't move. And he's like, don't worry, I'm not going to let anything happen to your son, just let me get up. So he chases them on a bicycle, and Gordon chases the car to a bridge and shoots out the tire. Car crashes on the side of the bridge, and he goes to investigate, and the goon jumps out with a knife, and knife in one hand, baby in the other, and attacks Gordon. And in the kerfuffle, the baby gets dropped over the bridge, and Bruce appears out of nowhere, and he catches the baby, saves it, and Gordon, who now has lost his glasses, he says, thanks for saving my kid, but I can't see who you are without my glasses. I hear sirens, you should probably go. And then we cut to Flass on trial, and Gordon says, basically, he never thought Flass was this intelligent, but apparently in all of his meetings with Loeb, Flass had been, tracking dates and conversation notes and everything, and basically, instead of indicting himself and getting himself in trouble, he just throws Loeb under the bus. And with this, Loeb announces his resignation, and Gordon then gets promoted to captain, and he's doing this little monologue on the side of a bridge. And he says, with all these things going on, I've still got one thing keeping my attention. Some nutcase named the Joker is wreaking havoc. And that's how it ends. That's the end of 407 and the end of Batman Year 1. So now we move to the final issue of Batman Year 1, issue 407, chapter 4. And it opens with Gordon and Essen having a moment in the diner they always go to after their shifts. And they're talking about, where this is going. And she brings up, if your wife wasn't pregnant, would we? No, I'm sorry. It's not fair to you. And then we cut to Gordon and Essen sharing a lovely goodbye kiss in his office. And he tells us that she has been transferred and she's moving to New York. And then we cut again to Gordon, who busts a dealer named Skeevers. But Skeevers then gets to walk, and Gordon goes to Harvey Dent's office and yells at him about it. Why'd you let him walk? And he's very upset about it. So then Batman makes his way to Skeevers' apartment, and he basically takes him down and convinces him to strike a plea deal with Gordon so that they'll get a testimony about Flass, and they're going to take him down. And then Commissioner Loeb calls Gordon into his office and says, basically, you're going to drop this case on Flass unless you want everybody to know about the little affair you've been having with Essen. And this terrifies Gordon. So anyway, Gordon and his wife go to Wayne Manor, and they go to interrogate Bruce about, whether or not he's Batman. And Bruce is sitting there on the couch, lounging in his bathrobe, drinking some champagne with a girl on his arm. And he's like, what are you talking about? Batman? Really? Look at me. I'm sitting here getting drunk. So Gordon and his wife leave, and Gordon stops the car, and he decides to tell his wife everything that happened with Essen, so that way he doesn't have to fear about blackmail. He told her himself, and so it doesn't matter if the commissioner tells her, whatever. So he goes on pursuing this case on Flass. And then Gordon interrogates Flass, and then Skeevers gets poisoned before he goes to testify in the trial. And this is a lot of rapid cuts. And then Gordon's wife gives birth, and they have a baby boy. And then we cut to Selena in her apartment with her associate, and she's talking about how much money she's stolen, but she doesn't know what to do with all these jewels and watches and jewelry, whatever. But she gets upset when the news credits Batman with all these robberies. She's pretty upset about it because she wants to be the one who's known as the cat burglar. So anyway, we cut to Batman on a new Bat glider, and he's doing some surveillance on the Roman, who's going to tell his nephew some indicting evidence about all the partnerships with the cops and whatnot. And then Catwoman shows up trying to rob the place, and she gets into this whole kerfuffle with the Roman and his gang, and so she ruins Bruce's reconnaissance mission. And then we cut to Gordon getting woken up to feed the baby, and then he gets a call from the commissioner. You have to go do this. And so he leaves his apartment, and then he has this aha moment of, wait, the thing he called me to do isn't necessary, or like it's already happened or whatever. And then he realizes something's up. So he turns around, he goes back home just in time to see that his wife and son have been kidnapped. And he catches the assailants while they're outside his house going into the car. So then he shoots the goons, and they take off with his son, and here's a motorcycle rev up behind him, shoots the man on the motorcycle, steals the motorcycle, and then chases after the car with his son in. And then we find out that it's Bruce who is on the back of the motorcycle, and Gordon's wife has a gun to his head and says, I'll kill you, don't move. And he's like, don't worry, I'm not going to let anything happen to your son, just let me get up. So he chases them on a bicycle, and Gordon chases the car to a bridge and shoots out the tire. Car crashes on the side of the bridge, and he goes to investigate, and the goon jumps out with a knife in one hand, baby in the other, and attacks Gordon. And in the kerfuffle, the baby gets dropped over the bridge, and Bruce appears out of nowhere, and he catches the baby, saves it, and Gordon, who now has lost his glasses, he says, thanks for saving my kid. But I can't see who you are without my glasses. I hear sirens, you should probably go. And then we cut to Flass on trial. And Gordon says, basically he he never thought Flass was this intelligent, but apparently in all of his meetings with Loeb, Flass had been, tracking dates and conversation notes and everything. And basically, instead of indicting himself and getting himself in trouble, he just throws Loeb under the bus. And with this, Loeb announces his resignation, and Gordon then gets promoted to captain, and he's doing this little monologue on the side of a bridge. And he says, with all these things going on, I've still got one thing keeping my attention. Some nutcase named the Joker is wreaking havoc. And that's how it ends. That's the end of 407 and the end of Batman Year One. So overall, I think this was a great story. It's definitely a great jumping off point into the Batman universe. This book required little to no prior knowledge of Batman. Heading into it, you can have no idea what Batman is, who he is, anything about his mythos, and you can read this book and you're not missing out on anything. There's no prior knowledge you need. So I really think this is a great way to get into comics. It's a great jumping off point for anybody looking to start their comic journey, or for anybody who loves comics. It's a great read. The art is amazing. I love the style of it. It's very semi-realistic, but it's got that edgy feel because Gotham is an edgy city. So it's the art really matches the vibe of what they're going for with Gotham and what anybody knows about Gotham. It's got that that real edgy feel, very dark and kind of sinister, but it's certainly not a lighthearted story by any means, but it's very entertaining, a very good read. Some pros about this book, like I said earlier, you don't need any prior knowledge of Batman or his mythos. You can jump right in and get started. As far as some cons go, there's no like overarching villain, so there's nobody to latch onto as the enemy until you get, like semi halfway through the book, and then you realize, oh, it's just, the corruption that's the bad guy. So it's, the commissioner and Detective Flash, but there's no Joker, there's no Scarecrow, no Mr. Freeze or Two-Face or anybody. And so as far as cons go, it's just, if you're expecting, a Batman story like from Batman the Animated Series or something from the Justice League shows, it's a little disappointing that you don't get to see any of those cool villains. But other than that, it's a great book. I would highly recommend it to anybody. And as far as what to read next, a lot of people have argued over, what goes next. But for me personally, I think the Long Halloween series is a great next step, and I will be covering that in another video. But the Long Halloween is basically, Batman in essentially his third year of on the job, and that's when you really get to enter the mythos of Batman and all his villains that everybody loves so much. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. I'm just getting started on this channel, but I'd love to review all the books I can. I've been reading comic books for a little over a year now. Got my start with a sale. Got a bunch of books for 70% off. Built a collection, and now I'm hooked. And I just want to share the stories with everybody I can. And it took me a lot of time and patience and research to kind of figure out what to read and where to get into it, and what certain things happen and what other things meant. And I just want to be able to, share that experience with other people, and maybe, help other readers get a jumping off point and be able to, enjoy comics like I think everybody should. So anyway, have a great day. Please subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you guys for the next video.